And then I am going to switch to our prayer for today. So Trudy is from Shortsville, New York, and I don't know where Shortsville is. Trudy, if you're with us, can you want to chime in and tell us where you are? All right, so I'm going to share my screen. She wrote a lovely prayer for today. And does everybody see the prayer there for today? Nod, someone give me some feedback there. Let me know. Nod, thank you. I got a couple nods. I appreciate that. So if you will, please join with me in prayer. And again, this prayer is provided to us by our prayer captain for this month is Trudy Double from Shortsville, New York. And if anybody else is interested in being a prayer captain in the months to come, I posted which the 3 blocks are for the next month, and the following months are all on our website. I would love to have your prayers be part of our quilt along. So if you will, please bow your heads and pray. Abba, Father, we are your children whose love for you knows no bound, as the parables tell us. We are your servants, faithfully awaiting your return, watching for your return. Help us through this adventure of quilting your parables to reach those that do not know you. With each stitch, we will pray for the foolish servants that have not recognized you as their Lord and Savior, those that do not know you as their loving Father. Be with us today as we gather together and receive our new blocks and carry on spreading your word. In your holy name, Jesus the Christ, amen. And that is a lovely prayer. Thank you, Trudy. You know, sometimes it's pretty easy to lose track of, the commandment that we share with others. And we do that through our faith-based quilts all the time. I love it when people come into the shop and they'll look at a quilt on the wall, and I have the opportunity to tell them, that this is a Christian quilt. I'll show them my 10 Commandments quilt or my Songs of Faith quilt, or they can see back on my design wall that I'm working on my Parables quilt. And it's an opportunity for me to share my faith all the time. And that's one of the things I love about it. So I hope that you have those same opportunities as well. Before we get started on block 8 and block 9, I want to show you something that I did with my previous blocks. Last month, we had these 2 blocks, and I showed you this block and this block. And I had used this dark tan. It's actually a peppercorn cotton, because it was the same as this fabric in my block here. And actually, as I stood back and I looked at it, I wasn't sure if I liked it because I really couldn't see the red, orange half squares. So I redid my block using a lighter background fabric. And it's interesting because when I had my pattern testers here, about 50% of them still liked this block better, and 50% of them still liked this block better. So I'm going to hang on to both and see what I need when I finish my quilt, when I decide whether or not I need more dark or if I need more light in my units. And I guess I'm just trying to give everybody permission to not be in love with your blocks. If you're not in love with it, you can change it, or you can wait and change it later. Towards the end of this summer, in August, most likely, I'll be giving you one indication of what the final setting is going to look like. And it'll be one of the final settings. And that might give you some idea to choose how to choose your fabrics. Thank you, Carol. Carol just admitted Barb. Barb's going to be joining us now. So with that, who has some blocks that they'd like to show us? I'd love to see your blocks. What you'll need to do is unmute your microphone and state your name and where you're from, and show us some of your blocks that you've made. Don't be shy, everybody. Jump right in there. Anyone have any blocks to show us? Oh, I see some on the, sometimes I don't know your name. Okay. Karen, will you unmute your microphone and show us your blocks?
Hi, I'm Karen Smith from Howard, Ohio. And there is one of my blocks. You can see it. And this is the other one.
Oh, lovely. The contrast on those are amazing. They look great.
I'm kind of staying with solid colors for some reason. That's kind of what I've decided to do. So we'll see how it goes.
One of our pattern testers that comes here is using mostly fabrics that really read as a solid. She's using, from a distance, you can't tell that they're not as a solid because she too thinks that the blocks are busy enough as they are that she's just trying to stay
Right.
away from a patterned print.
That's kind of what I had thought, but I love it. I really like how we're going. So thank
Oh,
you.
good, good. Who else has something to show us? I saw somebody here. I'll change my view so I can see again. I saw somebody had some blocks. Okay, so this one says to Quilt. That's a nice name, but I don't know who you are. Will you unmute and show us your blocks? She's having a hard time unmuting. There we go. Okay, give us your name and tell us about your blocks.
I'm Renee Greer from Williamsville, Missouri. And these are my blocks. I love this block.
It's
was one of my
beautiful.
I really like this. And one of my groups make quilts for veterans, and I think it'd be a beautiful block in red, white, and blue. So I think that's one I'm going to do maybe later. And this is my other block.
Oh, that looks great. And I can see your other little ones in the background and your Jesus the teacher. He's beautiful.
That was quite a challenge.
I
really
know.
organized.
Yeah, organization was the key to that one. That's
Yes,
true.
it is. Yes.
Who-
Thank you. I've loved doing these.
So since you mentioned red, white, and blue, that is one of our alternate patterns that we'll be releasing later this week. And I apologize that I don't have those out any sooner, but we don't have those videos edited yet. We're still not at full staff post pandemic. And so sometimes getting my videos edited is a problem. But I did, let me find a pen. We've got a runner that we did where we used that block 3 times, and I still have the borders to go on this, but I chose to do it not necessarily patriotic, but I did some patriotic colors. I have reds, blues, and I did a gold for the background, but I love the way it sets nicely and makes a beautiful block placement. It'd be a great block to use up your scraps and use a variety of different fabrics that are circling those stars. So it'd be a great block for that as well, because you can use those thinner pieces, those 1.5 inch pieces. And sometimes we have those skinny scraps. So that's kind of a great little block for that. Who else has some blocks to show us? Miss Grace is here and she's got blocks to show us from this week even. I'm going to turn the camera around so you can see.
No, I'll just bring it.
So she's going to come over on this side. Good deal. So this is Grace. No, you come, Grace. There you go.
Okay.
This is Grace and she's from Missouri Valley. These are our blocks we're working on this week. That's beautiful, Grace.
And
And this is her wise and foolish servant. Oh, that's beautiful too.
thank you.
There was a challenge, wasn't it, Grace?
Yes.
So Grace is one of my pattern testers and she found some places where I could improve the pattern, and I did, but it made it a couple pages longer. So while I apologize for the length of the pattern, it's going to make it a lot easier to piece. Do we have any other blocks to show today? Okay, so I'm going to iPad. I don't know who you are, but I see a purple block. Will you unmute and then tell us who you are?
Hi, I'm Karen Foster from San Antonio, And I'm here with my friends Christina and Beth. We're all three doing this, this quilt along together. This is my block. And then here's my other one.
Beautiful.
I'm doing all of mine in grunge.
That's exactly the fabric line that other quilter that I was telling you about that Liz is using. She's using a grunge also. And she said simply because it allows the blocks just to settle down a little bit. I love that you girls are together to do this. That's wonderful.
I thought they should call them girls.
Well, I don't know what else I'd call you girls. So I did hear you. That's right.
I'm kind of new to this again.
Okay, yeah, yep, time to mute. There you go. Who else has some blocks to show us? Anybody else? I'm looking around here, trying to see if anybody's showing me anything. I don't see anything else then, so we'll go ahead and we'll begin. Okay, so this month we have 2 blocks. We have Wise and Faithful Servant, which is block 9, which is a very, very easy block. And then I did it again, everybody. I gave you a challenging block, which is block 8, Servants Must Remain Watchful. So I'm going to spend most of my time with you on block 8 because block 9 is fairly simple. So if it's all right with you, we're going to do block 9 first, get it done and get it out of the way, and then we'll move on to block 8. You'll notice behind me, I have block 9 done and up, and block 8, I still have to show you because I have a few things I want to show you. So in the story, Wise and Foolish Servant, Jesus is telling us to remain watchful. We don't know when he's going to come, but we have to be ready. And it doesn't mean that we have to literally stay awake 24 hours a day. It means that when we are on duty, which is basically our waking hours, we're supposed to be conducting ourselves as the Christians that he asks us to be. And we're not supposed to take a break from that. So that means that we're always on duty when we're awake. It means that we're prayerful, we're watchful, we treat each other with the respect that they deserve, always. And it's interesting because I use the reference of when the cat's away, the mice will play. And as a former educator, I know exactly what it was like when I would step out of the classroom. Immediately you'd hear giggles erupting in the classroom. And you guys know this, you've been there, you've been in similar situations that when the supervisor is gone and out of sight, you're going to have some people who work very, very hard and continue to do what they're supposed to do. And you're going to have others who like to take an opportunity to take advantage of that opportunity. So this parable is about that. It's about being watchful and not playing when the cat's away. And the easiest way to think about it is what our persona is like on Sundays versus what our persona is like the other 6 days of the week. It's pretty easy to be watchful on Sundays when we're sitting in church and we go home from church and we have our family meal and we continue to act like the Christians that we're supposed to act like. But do we do it the rest of the week? And that's what this block is about. So the block itself its known name is called the Fool's Puzzle. And I chose that block because it's a puzzle. We don't know when Jesus is going to return, and we'd be a fool to not be ready for that. So he told the story of the wise and the foolish servant, and I'm using that as my example. Now, here on my design wall, you see my wise and foolish servant that I chose for this fabric way, and you can see a different one over here that I chose for my brighter fabric way. And I'm going to pull those 2 closer so that you can see them. Now you can use directional fabric. In fact, when I did the original design, I wanted to use a stripe so that I could make these side pieces look like they radiate out. But as it turned out, when I did that, we really struggled here at the pattern testers trying to figure out which direction my stripes are supposed to go. I probably spent about a half an hour trying to determine on this particular fabric which direction the stripes were going to go. So keep that in mind when you're doing your piece, that if you're using directional fabric, you need to use it with purpose and it has to actually add to the design. When we finished up our units, we had some people say they look like frogs and some people say they look like spiders. And I got to thinking this would be a fun block to put into a children's quilt with some really bright fabrics where some of the spiders are going this direction and some of them are going this direction. Whichever you choose to do, you can use a little bit larger scale, maybe a medium scale print for parts of this, as long as it reads as a common color. If you're using a print, sorry that I disappeared there for a second. If you're using a print where the color changes very much, then you're not going to want to use it in this block because you're not going to get the consistent color that you want. And then you want to make sure that you're using for your half squares that you're using something that has a lot of contrast so it shows up really nicely. In my other colorway, I chose not a white background, but I chose a colored background because when I'm putting it on this cross, I've decided that I'm going to save my lightest background for my biggest and my smallest blocks, and my 8-inch blocks, I always want to introduce more color. That's a choice I've made. You can do what you like. Again, you make the block so that it looks good. I chose for this fabric way, the same fabric that I'd used here. So again, I'm introducing those same fabrics in my quilt. On the pattern itself, we're doing some flying geese using a very traditional method. And so on the pattern, I indicate right here in this area, what you need to do in order to make the flying geese unit. And it's very similar to what we did in this block. So it's the exact same instructions to make those flying geese units right here. So that should not be hard. That's nothing new. And then the other rest of it is just putting those little quarter square triangles together so that they make the 4X in the middle. So that's a fairly simple block. Everything is pressed open, so it's nice and easy, and we don't have bulk. If we didn't press it open, we'd have bulk in some of those seams there, and it'd make it very difficult for it to lay flat. Okay, now you're ready for the challenging one. I'm going to apologize right away because it is a bit of a challenge. Okay, block 8. This is the servants must remain watchful. In this particular parable, just prior to these words here that we have, Jesus told the story about a servant who's the doorkeeper. And the doorkeeper was a servant who had more responsibilities than just a regular servant in the house. The doorkeeper was the person that was responsible for all the comings and goings in the house. The doorkeeper was the person that had the keys to the house, made sure that all the guests were greeted and that they were proper to be there at the house. And they also made sure that they checked all the servants when they left, made sure that the servants weren't stealing. So the doorkeeper really had a large role. And back at the time when Jesus walked the face of the earth, there was a doorkeeper on duty day and night. So the doorkeeper always had to be watchful. Now, Jesus is not telling us that we have to be watchful when we're sleeping. He's not expecting that of us. But during the day, he's expecting us to be the doorkeeper, which is more than just watching and waiting for him to return. It's being responsible for the house, being responsible for the church. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying with the prayer. I so appreciated Trudy's prayer where she was praying with us, praying for us, and praying for others who don't know Jesus the way we do. That's what Jesus is calling us to do. We're to be the doorkeeper. We're supposed to watch the comings and the goings, and it's our responsibility. So I love that parable in that regard. Now the pattern is a challenging one. So get ready. We're going to do something similar to what we did with Jesus the teacher, only it's not quite that challenging. However, after you've done Jesus the teacher, everything seems easy. I'm going to switch my camera to the overhead camera so I can show you the parts of the pattern. There we go. It's the right camera. Just like all of our patterns, on this particular pattern, It does have the cutting instructions, and it shows that the arrows, that's what I'm calling these pieces here coming into that center block unit. It shows them as the light and dark blue that I show here. I call that the outer arrows. And the light and the dark green shown here, I call that the inner arrows. That's as far as I went initially when we pattern tested. And right away, people were having trouble distinguishing between inner arrows, outer arrows, green, blue. It was a challenge. And so what I did was I added a second chart. So this is similar to what we did in Jesus the Teacher. Once you have your fabric selected, what's important is that you have contrast and that your contrast is of equal value. Let me show you what I mean. In my Jesus the Teacher quilt, or in my block that I have here, my background is light. It has some blues, reds, and purples. For my arrows, for my inner arrow, I've chosen, got big pieces of fabric here, a dark green and a light green. They happen to be the same fabric line. They contrast nicely. I've chosen for my outer arrow, a dark blue and a light blue. Now it's important that the two lights are of equal value and the two darks are of equal value or near equal value in order for it to give the overall appearance of the arrow being folded in half and moving through the unit. By the same token, in my alternate colorway, which I had here a moment ago and now has disappeared. Oh, I found it. In my alternate colorway, the yellow on white is my background. I have a blue again for my outer arrow, a dark and a light. These are brighter fabrics because that whole quilt is brighter. And then I tricked it up a little bit. For my inner arrow, I went with a coral. And again, I've got this repeated pattern, but this time this fabric is not my dark. It's closer in value here, and these two are closer in value. So this is going to look a little different as I put it together. And then that square that shows orange on your pattern, I chose this grunge because it brings out that deep purplish red out of all of them. And these are all fabrics that are in my bright quilt. So in order to keep it straight, I need to place a piece of each fabric so that I know that my D1, L1, D2, and L2, I know which fabrics they are. That will help a lot to have these not get confused as you piece them together. Then in step 1, once you've made your half squares, you're going to make 4 half square units that look like this using L1, 4 that use D1, 4 that use L1 and D1, 4 that use L2 and D2. So in the final video, which you'll see later this week, I'm real clear about how you make these units and how you keep track of them. Now, I like to use a Marty Michelle unit for cutting. I'm sorry, a Marty Michelle ruler for cutting, because the pattern calls for you to cut 2 7/8 in squares. I'll go back to that first page. You need 4 of those out of each of these arrow fabrics. Well, do yourself a favor and lay all 4 fabrics together, put a sharp blade into your rotary cutter and cut it one time. It's just as easy to do. But I like to use the Marty Michelle tool because the 1/8 inch marks are perforated and I can see exactly where they are. I also like to use her corner trimmer that once I have that triangle cut, I use this to trim the corner, and I'll show that in more detail on the final video. It does make a difference as far as the piecing goes. So that being said, it's really important as you move through each time to not only just look at the picture and think that you're doing what it says, read the instructions and take your measurements. So for example, when you get ready to do the half square units that follow here around the edges of that large square, the pattern will call for you to put the square on point, put your L2 unit in the lower left and a background unit in your upper right. This is the area where most of our pattern testers got into a little trouble because it said light here in the pattern. They put their background fabric here, and then the whole thing was off by 1/2 square and it didn't come out right. So make sure you're putting them in the placement like it calls for on the pattern. And you'll press those to the outside. You're basically making a square and a square, only you're using different colored fabrics in different places. So that when you finish that square and a square, it will look like this, and it's ready to go ahead for the rest of the unit. Everything is pressed to the outside, and it's measured to make sure that it measures 4.5 inches square. If it doesn't, you need to fix it before you move on.
Excuse me, Teresa.
Yes.
That is very dark. We can't even see the different
Oh,
colors.
okay, hang on here. Let's see.
Thank you.
Is that
Much-
better?
Much better.
Do you need me to re-explain any of that, anybody?
No, it was dark to see it.
Okay, thank you for letting me know that. So it's just really, so the difference is when I'm recording, that's too much light. And when I'm not recording, it makes a difference. When I'm zooming, I need more light. And when I'm recording, I need less. So you're going to want to make sure that's square, because that has to be 4.5 inches square in order for your whole unit to come out right. Okay. In steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you're going to be making the corners. And they're
I'm
different.
sorry, Teresa, but now it's actually too bright.
Okay. Let's see. Thanks for letting me know that, Elaine.
You're welcome.
Let's see. Is that better?
Yes, that's good. Thank
Okay.
you so much.
So in those next few steps, you're going to be making these corners, and the corners also have to measure 4.5 inches. That makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Because you're going to have a 4-inch, 4-inch, 4-inch finish block to get to your 12 inches. So measuring is going to be critical here, just like it was in the center of your Jesus the Teacher. If it doesn't measure right, undo it and get it right. Hang on here. I'm going to go back to bright now because I'm going to pull the pieces. Okay. So once you have all the pieces constructed, then the pattern's going to call, come back to dark. The pattern's going to call for you here to put a unit from step 6, a unit from step 3, and a unit from step 9 together. And I'm going to do that right here on the mat. That's what I want to show you guys. Is that bright enough? Okay, I'm going to assume it is. No one told me no. So the pattern shows you the direction that things need to go in order to put these units together. And it's really important that you take the time and make sure that yours looks exactly like the pattern. If it does, you're going to be matching up these center seams with the apex of that square and a square. And that may seem like it's a hard thing to do, but it truly is not. It will match up perfectly if you've sewn it well in the first place. And here's how you do it. You turn over your square and a square. You find the apex where those two seams come to a point, and you take a pin and you poke it straight through the apex, just straight. Can you see that, how I pinned that? Then you take that same pin and you poke it through. Hang on, I have to make sure I put this in the right spot. Yep. So I poke that through the apex. And I take that same pin and I poke it directly into the spot where the half square meets the seam. Shake it out a little bit, let the pin do the work, making sure that it's straight. The pin has that in place. Now, this is important. I don't fold the pin up and push it in to pin it, because now I've just moved where those seams match. Instead, again, I go through the apex, Go through where the half square meets the seam. Straighten the pieces out. Make sure that that pin is in nice and level. Once I know that pin's in nice and level, I take my fingers and I pinch right below the pin. Pull the pin out and now pin my unit in place because I had them pinched together. All right. Now I'm going to go over to the machine, show you just how easy that is. Get a little beginner in there. So with that pin in place, I can just stitch at 1/4 of an inch. And once my needle has worked its way into the uphill side of that seam allowance, I can remove the pin. I'll switch back here.
So Teresa,
Yes,
this is Kelly. Can I give you a tip on a class that I took a couple weeks ago
Sure.
about what he told us? It was on paper piecing, and he threads a piece of dental floss into the needle and pulls it through both fabrics to line up his points. And then you can sew right over the dental floss.
oh, that's a really good idea. Kelly, thank you for that. So you're saying take a dental floss, put it through a needle, so it's basically basted in place with the dental floss, and then you can sew straight through it. Right?
Yep.
Perfect. Well,
Yes.
that's a great tip. I'm going to try that one out.
Yeah, that was David Serrata.
That's wonderful. Where's he from?
He's from New Hampshire. He's been doing some online classes. He's been an awesome instructor.
Oh,
It's the
good.
no tears paper piecing.
Ah,
It's a different kind of method. That's totally cool.
oh, that sounds great. Thank you for sharing that, Kelly.
You're welcome.
Well, without the dental floss, this is what I've ended up with. I've got my seam matched up nicely with that point. These two are going to press open. So to do that, you're going to finger press. And this is so that you can reduce the bulk, which you're going to have bulk right there where that seam comes together. Use your fingernail to finger press that first to train that seam. Then set that iron in place for 5 seconds. And again, I use a dry iron so it doesn't introduce stretch into my units. And with that, that unit's looking pretty lovely. So I would do the very same thing with this unit, going through the apex, going through where the half square meets the other half square, where the half square meets the seam, or as Kelly's saying, to do that and actually thread some dental floss through your needle. Great idea. When I finish, I have a unit that looks like this. So you can see where the colors are starting to come out. The next instruction, step 13, is similar, but not quite the same. It's actually a little easier to piece. You're going to use this unit from step 11, and you're going to use your remaining square into squares. So for those, what I do, and I didn't use the floss, but you certainly could, you go through the apex, placing that needle through the apex, and then you place the needle through the seam at approximately 1/4 of an inch, as close to that as you can possibly get. Again, you let the pin do the work, making sure that it is parallel. Pull it out, pin it in place, and I'll just stitch that at 1/4 of an inch. Gonna come back to my machine so you can see that it really is that easy. Once again, when the needle is in the uphill side of the seam, I can remove my pin. And I'll trim off that beginner. And again, you can see that those match up nicely. I'll open up that seam, finger press it with my thumbnail, set that iron in place. Grace, could I have your block 8 again? Thank you. So once I have that complete, then I'll sew my top unit to it and my bottom unit to it. And you'll see that my L2 fabrics here, we're going to match up, giving that look. Which Grace's is complete, so I'm going to use hers. You can see that she chose a dark cobalt and then a lighter color blue to make her different arrows, which those are her light values, and then that comes down here, and those are her darker values there. But again, it gives that look of the overall arrow kind of coming through the block. That's a beautiful block, Grace. So those are our 2 blocks for this month. What questions do you have for me? Does anybody have any questions regarding the process so far? I appreciate your feedback on using the dental floss to help put that together. I'm anxious to try that out. And besides, I have to do something with all that floss that my dentist keeps giving me that I forget to use. So that's a good use of that. But I also appreciate your feedback on the lighting. It's a challenge for me to know oftentimes what you see on your end. If there are no questions, then that's everything I have for this month. Next month, we're going to have 3 blocks that should be in your email, those 3 blocks. And then we're going to be entering the Kingdom of Heaven blocks after this. So that's going to be a lot of fun for us as well. I hope that this process is helping you, not necessarily helping you, but solidifying your faith. I hope that the process of doing these blocks fills your bucket up. It does for me. When I have the opportunity to sit down or to reflect on the parables, it just fills my bucket and just makes me feel so blessed and helps me to know that, that I'm a very fortunate person to have this gift to be able to quilt and then to have the opportunity to share it with others. That's the part that I really enjoy. Well, I have nothing else for us today. I do have this one all recorded. If you remember last month, I got to the end and said, whoops, I forgot to hit recording. So I'll be sending this recording out to those of you that are participating today. But I also have all the recorded pieces finished, and they're being edited right now for the finished block. So this week you should get the edited video for blocks 8 and 9, plus the edited video for the finished extra setting pattern that we have from last month. So with that, I appreciate all of you. I thank you all, and I hope you have a blessed day. Make sure to think really hard about if you want to make a prayer for our next blocks, because I would really appreciate it. Thanks, and have a great day.